Kundun, which is a 1997 film directed by Martin Scorsese, the score by Philip Glass. The IMDb plot is from childhood to adulthood, Tibet's 14th Dalai Lama deals with the Chinese oppression and other problems. So this, I'll talk a little bit about the film and then get into the score. So this is a Scorsese film I saw at the time in the theater back in '97, and I remember liking the movie, but really like gravitating towards the score. And it's Philip Glass, so it's a very minimalist, using a lot of like Tibetan types of sounds in it. And I remember thinking, oh, this score is really unique, and they use it a lot over, especially the first act of the film, because it covers the Dalai Lama's life. When he's a child and he's found by the monks. There's a lot of silent sequences where there's not a lot of dialogue. So the film relies heavily on the score. And that just left a lasting impression on me. And then, fast forward, maybe it was like a year, I'm at my local library. And that's where I go actually to find a lot of film scores. When I was in high school, I go and like see what they had and then rent it. And then, I had a DVD ripper at the time, so I could then rip the soundtrack and listen to it. And I remember seeing this, I was like, oh yeah, I remember this music being kind of interesting. And I took it home and I ripped the CD and then listened to it. And it really like, not only was it much like the Harry Potter in terms of you're saying, like transporting me back to the film, it was less about that for me. It was more just the movie kind of the score kind of standing on its own outside of the film in terms of bringing me into the mindset of that like meditative, very introspective mindset. And I started listening to the score like all the time, especially when I was studying, needed to kind of focus. I throw that score on the background because, again, it is minimalist. You're not getting too distracted by the music, but it puts me in sort of like this Zen state, which is a lot of what I think Glass was trying to do in the film, where, this is obviously about a lot of serious things that Dalai Lama has to contemplate as he grows up and then becomes head of the state. And then the Chinese are, threatening the sovereignty of Tibet. So I think that was a lot of the themes that Glass was trying to capture in that. But for me, like this really just sits almost outside of the film in terms of this score for me. Like I've listened to this score way more times than I've ever seen this movie. Actually, I hadn't seen it in years since preparing for this podcast. It was the first time I'd seen it in probably like 20 years, actually. Still, I enjoyed it. I mean, it's beautifully shot. Deakins is one of my favorite cinematographers. Right. He shot this film, but I still couldn't get. I was like almost too hung up on the score, even when I was watching it, because the score means so much to me now. It was kind of interesting. But yeah, for me, I think I had to include this on the list. Not only because it really got me into Philip Glass, who's now one of my favorite composers, but this score for me just is now become something in and of itself outside of even the film. And I think that's something a lot of film scores do for me. It's sort of, even if I don't love the movie or watch the movie a lot of the times, I still put the score on, and the score puts me in a particular mood. Like Days of Thunder, The Edge, Assassination of Jesse James. These are all movies I like and I've seen once or twice, but I listen to those scores a lot. And I think that's just the power of the film score, that it can even sometimes survive outside of what the film's even trying to do.
Yeah, no, for sure. I'd never seen this movie until, in preparing for this episode. So it was a good blind spotting because, I do love Scorsese and the people involved. So it was good to kind of come watch this movie. From a pure score standpoint, I was worried going into this because typically whenever Hollywood is trying to, transport you to a different land, especially a different country, the score almost feels like bears the burden of that transportiveness, which could lead into this territory of kind of, very typical sort of kitsch sounds that are, which commercials and sort of popular cinema has kind of created in our minds. There's a typical sound for the Orient. There's a typical sound for, whatever, right? So I was sort of very wary of this is how this is probably going to be. But, of course, it's Philip Glass, who's amazing. And of course it wasn't. I think the score really felt like it was from the place. It felt, it had a very sort of natural, in the sense like a nature component to it. You could feel the winds and kind of the majesty of the landscape as it sort of, perpetrates through the monasteries and such. It felt very organic to me, which I don't even know what kind of instruments they used. I'm sure they use very local instruments to create that. But that's the first that really caught me. And that's how I would get transported. It has to feel authentic. It has to feel lived in and not just a caricature of a score that you're kind of just, imposing on. The other thing that really struck me was because you're witnessing really a child, who's sort of born in this very extraordinary circumstance, and this child is sort of, going to take on this life of importance, but he's still a child.
Right.
And it was kind of interesting to see the whimsy and the playfulness from a child's point of view, and just the oddity of the situation where the child is just like sitting hours and hours while all these grown-ups are praying around him. That's all in the score, but not in a, once again, in like a kitschy kind of way where, oh, here's like a little joke, so I'm just going to punctuate that with a score. No, it's very much in the breadth of the majesty of the score and its organicness, but it has these kind of playful tones to it, which I thought were very cool and made me smile just listening to it. But just a beautiful score. I can totally see how this would live beyond the movie and how this would be your, gateway to a Zen place and such. So yeah, was happy to see this on the list, was happy to watch the movie. I'm okay on the movie, frankly.
Yeah.
I had to fast forward a lot of it, which I feel like Scorsese sometimes can, not every movie has to be 3 hours long. So, but I get it. Like, you're creating a mood, and watching this at home is probably not the best way to watch this movie. So, but the score was exceptional.
Yeah. I mean, I hadn't seen this movie, like I said, in about 20 years. And for me, like, seeing it again, it was almost kind of weird. It's like, oh yeah, there are images against this score that now is like so ingrained in me. And yeah, the film is not one of Scorsese's best. It's one of, his couple meditative films on religion, which is not a topic that I typically find that interesting anyway. So I'm not like predisposed. But it is hard to find, though. I mean, they got in a lot of trouble with Chinese government when the film was released. Disney was banned in China for a long time because they allowed this movie to get released. So it is very hard to find, which, can be frustrating too. But I love actually your point on it is Philip Glass making a score about a Tibetan person set in Tibet, and that can get very, like kitsch. Like, a lot of times when you do these international scores, it sort of becomes, like you said, like, this is the way you would do a certain country. And I think it's surprising that he doesn't go there as much as you might expect. And maybe that's Martin too, kind of leading the way. But yeah, I'm glad I was able to check off one of the Scorsese films you haven't seen.
Yeah, indeed.
Hey there, it's Alex. If you like the review and discussion Karan and I just had, make sure you subscribe to our channel, Movies That Shaped Us, to get full episodes. Every other Wednesday, Karan and I cover a topic around important people, places, events, and moments in our lives, and then explore it through 3 of our favorite movies. Subscribe right now, or follow our podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts via the link in the description below. Hope you join us for the journey.